This is Metro Awakening VR, a made-for-VR prequel to the first game in the core series, Metro 2033. Made by the studio behind the Arizona Sunshine series and After the Fall, developer Vertigo Games takes us back to the claustrophobic subway stations and frigid irradiated surface of the series' earlier titles. Forgoing the open-world nature of Exodus, Metro Awakening looks to deliver something a little more focused. As a huge fan of the first two titles in the series, Metro Awakening looks to deliver more of what I loved about those earlier games, but leveled up for virtual reality. I've played it across all three platforms, so stick around and I'll tell you my thoughts. Hey guys, it's Chris from the VR Grid and welcome to the channel. If you like this video, give it a like for us, and if you're interested in more VR content from us, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss new videos as they drop. And if you're looking to join our VR conversations, feel free to leave a comment, or even better, join us each and every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific here for the Virtual Boys podcast. Kicking things off, let's talk a little bit about the game's story, because one of the things that probably surprised me the most here with Metro Awakening was how much care and attention went into the game's narrative, but also its world building. Let me be clear, this feels like a full Metro game and works as a great companion piece to the later games in the series. Acting as a prequel to Metro 2033, the game's story follows Sadar, a doctor who must venture into the treacherous Moscow tunnel system in order to reunite with his wife. The story was described by the team as the origin story for Khan, a supernatural being in the Metro universe. Written in conjunction with the series author Dmitry Glukhovsky, totally butchered that, who also acted as lore advisor during the game's development, the game's 12 chapters flow seamlessly together to tell a surprisingly deep and emotional tale that honestly we rarely get to see in most VR titles these days. Between this and Batman Arkham Shadow, we VR headsets are certainly getting spoiled this fall. Now, as someone who doesn't have a lot of patience for long, drawn-out narratives in my games, what I loved about Metro Awakening is that while you do get to meet and interact with the game's cast of characters, much of the game's exposition is told through your radio while you're on the move. This got me into the game, but it also kept me company while I crept through the game's darkly lit and often dangerous corridors. However, speaking of getting into the game, let's talk gameplay. Now, like I said at the start, this is developed by the same people who made the Arizona Sunshine games and After the Fall. And I will say that while playing the game, the DNA of those titles is certainly felt here in a multitude of ways. But it has been filtered and polished through the lens of the Metro games, by which the oversight of original developer A4 Games and publisher Deep Silver can be felt here as well. Now, I have really enjoyed the mentioned shooters from Vertigo Games, but I have been vocal leading up to this release that those games simply were not good enough to be Metro games, and I had concerns about developer Vertigo Games' capabilities in taking on such a special IP. Right from the game's offset, it is clear that this is going to be a Metro title and not simply a reskinned Arizona Sunshine, as players are free to walk around and live in this breathing underground refuge in one of the series' famous makeshift villages. Here, I just walked around talking to residents, playing my guitar, and taking in the rich world detail. Story details that I won't get into here led me onto a mission into the depths of the Metro, and off I went, leaving the safe confines of the village. I mention this because I loved how the game's mission structure is, with few exceptions, all connected. You literally open the gates of the village, say goodbye to the guards, and walk out into your first mission. Metro Awakening is broken up into 12 chapters and can be played on 3 different difficulties. I chose to play it on hard, as one of my favorite aspects of the series has been the need to scrounge for ammo and health, making every shot count. The game balancing here did in fact feel in line with those earlier entries in the series, and it took me about 10 hours to complete the game as I was searching every nook and cranny for each bullet that I could find. Some may find that length disappointing, but it felt right here to me, as the game does tend to run out of new ideas and weapons a little after the halfway point, so it also doesn't overstay its welcome. Like the first two Metro games, Awakening is a fairly linear game with a very deliberate pacing that some may find to be a bit of a slow burn. The game definitely favors story, atmosphere, and the sense of being in the world over combat, something which those early titles did as well. That being said, while exploration for ammo and health is encouraged, especially on harder difficulties, the game does suffer a bit from Vertigo Games' less than creative approach to level design. As was prevalent in Arizona Sunshine 2, anything outside of the critical path is all too often uninteresting, and rarely rewards players with taking the time to explore the numerous repeated areas and dead ends. Here, many paths simply feel added in, with many simply connecting to each other without much thought or reason. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the more open nature beyond just a simple path forward, but when combined with the game's repetition of environments and ideas throughout its campaign, the game did start to feel a bit padded. Thankfully, this didn't really take away too much from my enjoyment of the game though, as despite these shortcomings, the game itself is just a lot of fun to play. Starting out, players are equipped with the essential Metro loadout, a pistol with only a few bullets, a lighter, a gas mask for the irradiated areas, and a headlamp with a weak battery that must be charged from time to time with your portable winding generator. All of which, with the exception of your pistol, are stored on your trusty backpack. I, for the most part, love how Vertigo Games have handled inventory management here in Metro Awakening, and it definitely shows their experience in making VR shooters. In what may take players a minute to get used to, the developers have opted for a very clean approach to player loadouts. With no visible body or holstered items, all you see is your hands. Now, see if you can follow me here. Grabbing at your left shoulder with your left hand brings out the front of your backpack. Here you can access your portable generator, a compass, a lighter, the ability to track your ammo and health canister inventory, and of course, your gas mask filters, which can be grabbed here and twisted on when wearing your gas mask with available oxygen tracked on your watch. Furthermore, when wearing said backpack, any consumable you find in the world that is stored in that backpack can be simply placed on your back or in your chest to store it. Now, grabbing your right shoulder with your left hand will bring out the backpack again, but this time from the backside, where players can choose what two-handed primary weapon they want activated. Once chosen, this will be the weapon that is stored on your back for quick access, and it is grabbed by taking your right hand and reaching over your right shoulder. Additionally, your pistol, while not visible when stored, is accessed on your right hip with your right hand, while your healing syringe is accessed on your left hip with your left hand. Grenades are stored on your left chest and only accessed by grabbing your left chest with your right hand. And finally, any ammunition is grabbed from either your chest or waist, depending on what you choose in the settings, and will produce a clip of whatever gun you have out. This is very similar to the Arizona Sunshine games. Now, I should mention that much of this can be reversed if you are left-handed, so you lefties out there, you don't have to worry. Like I said, this may take a minute to acclimate to, and admittedly, I didn't love that I couldn't see any of my holstered items until I grabbed them, but I did grow to love this approach as it kept everything clean on screen, and the assignment of certain hands to grab certain things made for a lot less VR jank of the wrong items being grabbed by accident. This is especially appreciated in the game's combat sections, which aren't a constant thing here, but can be pretty intense when they do happen, and especially so when using the PSVR 2 haptics in the controller, which the game does happily take advantage of. Combat is primarily broken up into two types of situations. The first is when you run into the mutated creatures of the Metro universe. These are often of the more horror variety and will give fans of the series a slew of greatest hits encounters that are sure to pucker up their buttholes, as they are often fast and furious, as many creatures use the many air ducts and hole systems found around the environment and easily can flank you. The second combat situation that players will have to deal with comes in the form of enemy soldiers. These armed enemy encounters usually take place in larger, more open environments and really let players choose how they want to approach the situations. I thought the AI here was actually really good, and it made these encounters some of the best combat moments in the game. Enemies react to sound and light, making stealth a recommended opening approach, especially when playing on hard difficulty and short on ammo. Unfortunately, like the game's level design, combat options are a little limiting though, as soldiers pretty much all carry the same type of weapon, which does tend to make the game's many soldier encounters feel a little samey. This isn't helped by your own rather limiting loadout that consists of a pistol and your trusty AK-47, for which these will be your main go-to weapons. Throughout your campaign run, you will also get a dart gun and a shotgun, both of which must be manually loaded, and of course, some grenades to finish things off. Thankfully, all the weapons here are fun to use and handle great in VR, but I really missed some of the missing guns from the previous games, most noticeably the pneumatic-based ones that needed to be pumped up. Additionally, Metro Awakening has done away completely with the previous game's upgradable weapons, or any in-world vendors to purchase weapons or supplies from. I'm not gonna lie, this omission, it really hurts the game for me, as that was such an important part of the game loop and the pacing in those prior entries. Not having this present in the game does make the game feel at times like more of a VR Metro experience rather than a full-fledged entry in the series, as it does lean into more of its Arizona Sunshine roots and feels feels like such a missed opportunity considering Vertigo's other title, After the Fall, incorporated a weapon upgrade system that in fact seemed to borrow a lot from the Metro series. My disappointment aside though, this didn't really ruin the game for me, as like I said, the guns that it does have and the combat itself is handled expertly and made combat situations fun and often very deadly, especially when I was counting bullets and punching heads to make them last. Outside of combat, players can run, crouch, climb, open doors, and pick up items with a magnetic grapple function. Now, I know this is pretty standard fare for most VR games these days, but I mention it here because it's all done very well here and mostly free of the jank that plagues many VR games, including Vertigo's own prior titles. The overall experience of playing Metro is a very polished one and will for many bring to mind the first time that they played Half-Life Alyx, and everything just worked. Now, speaking of Half-Life Alyx, I think many are wondering how Metro stacks up visually. Now, of course, that answer differs depending on what platform you're talking about, but I will say that regardless of what platform you play Metro on, it is definitely a good-looking game. Most of the time, and for that matter, most of the footage you're watching here was captured on the PC version, and yes, it is the best looking version if you have the graphics card to max out the game's settings. The ability to run the game with the highest texture detail or resolution scaling and particle effects really does give Half-Life Alyx a run for its money, held back only by some low resolution textures when looking at world detail up close and some rough design work on certain objects. That is no doubt the result of the game having to run on the Quest 2 and 3 as well. Those low resolution textures and some slight texture pop-in does hold Metro back from knocking Alyx off its podium visually, but man, does this game look good when it really flexes its lighting engine and particle effects, most notably when looking at the fog and haze that drenches much of the Metro. This often looks every bit the AAA game we wanted in VR, and the PC is definitely the best place to see that flex. Jumping quickly to the Quest 2 and 3 versions, I will say that the Quest 3 version was actually quite impressive. Quest 3 users are definitely getting a significantly improved version here, sporting improved textures both up close as well as further texture draw distance. Additionally, there is the use of more dynamic lighting where possible and a higher overall render resolution over the Quest 2 version. The result is actually a pretty sharp and detailed Quest 3 port, but I won't lie, much of the dynamic lighting and particle effects are absent here in both the Quest 2 and Quest 3 versions, and it does certainly remove much of that AAA sheen that makes the PC version pop. The headlamp lighting is still present though, and some of those dynamic shadows have been baked in to give a similar effect, but the difference between the PC and the Quest 3 version is still very apparent. Now, for PSVR 2 owners, it's mostly good news as you're getting all those fancy dynamic lighting effects, higher resolution textures, and the PC's greatly improved particle effects that give Metro its fantastic ambiance. Unfortunately though, at least on this launch review version, Vertigo Games carries on its habit of not supporting dynamic foveated rendering, and as a result, the PSVR 2 version is using reprojection to hit its desired frame rate, and is running at a slightly lower resolution than what the PC version can achieve. Don't get me wrong guys, the PSVR 2 version is still easily one of the best looking PSVR 2 games on the headset, but damn, that reprojection is a real killjoy, as I can see the blurring effects every time I turn. It's not the worst I've seen on the headset, but it definitely is obvious, especially if you're sensitive to it. Now, getting away from the specifics of the different versions, it is obvious that a lot of time and care went into making this game, as it definitely sees Vertigo Games punching way above its weight class visually, blowing away anything they have done previously. This looks and feels very much like those earlier Metro titles, and it really captures the feeling that I had when playing them. This is likely helped by the fact that original Metro developer 4A Games shared visual assets from earlier titles, but Vertigo has done a great job of realizing these for VR, creating a great sense of what it's like to live in the dark, damp, and dreary depths of the Metro while walking through desolate hallways and dark, soaked interiors. That being said, the game does suffer from a sense of sameness throughout its 12 chapters, recycling a lot of assets, locations, and enemy types, and that, more than anything, reminded me that I was playing a VR game on a tighter budget rather than a full-fledged AAA title in the core series. Sound-wise though, Metro is stunning, with voice acting that sounds every bit as good as the other titles in the series, which for me really grounded the game. This is a huge win here, especially since Metro Awakening is also the first title in the series to fully voice the character that you play.
Want to switch jobs? Maybe you should chase runaways and assholes all day and let me run around playing doctor for a while. I've got a very healthy list of people I'd like to stab with a needle, let me tell you.
I think you may want to work on your bedside manner.
Don't even start. You and your wife are not my favorite people right about now.
Yana, has something happened?
Has something happened? He asks.
Don't think you can hide, bitch! Keep your eyes open!
This, when combined with a fantastic original score, and Metro Awakening hits the ground running in just its opening moments. Thankfully though, the game continues this level of quality with a great 3D sound mix that really puts players into the game world, delivering a rich and detailed soundscape, punchy guns, and a very creepy atmosphere that really brought to life the world of Metro. The visuals may not quite deliver on the hope of a truly AAA Metro VR experience, but the audio side of things certainly does. And finally, that brings me to my final thoughts and review score. As a huge fan of the first two games in the Metro series, the thought of a new VR entry that looked to capture that same gameplay style, pacing, and look seemed too good to be true. I honestly just wasn't sure Vertigo Games was up to the task, so I remained cautiously optimistic. Well, I'm happy to say that Metro Awakening VR is far better than I expected and almost as good as I hoped it could be. Metro Awakening almost perfectly recreates the feeling of being and playing inside the Metro universe, and by doing so, delivers one of the best VR games I've played this year, or well, maybe any year. Visually, the Quest 3 version is certainly no slouch, and another testament to where we are currently with standalone VR. But the PSVR 2, and even more so the PCVR version of the game with its incredible use of lighting and particle effects, reminded me just how glorious a premium VR title can look when done right. Sure, there are a few low quality textures here and there, and the game can be a bit samey with its locations, but when taken together with its excellent sound mix and fun, polished gameplay, Metro Awakening is what I would call must-play VR. Is it as good as the first two entries in the Metro series? No, as it does run out of new weapons, locations, enemies, and ideas a little too soon, likely showing its budget limitations. But what it lacks in budget, it almost makes up for in execution, as Vertigo Games does a lot right here and made playing a Metro game in VR immersive and memorable. The VR Grid gives Metro Awakening an 8.5 out of 10. Anyways guys, that's it from us. Let us know in the comments below if you're planning on picking up Metro Awakening, and if so, what version.